Tom Cooper has a business side and a theological side. He was vice president of a construction company, partner in a bookstore, and some other ventures before he entered the ministry and became a minister of the Presbyterian Church in Canada. He's used the resources he was blessed with to give back to society, which placed him on this year's Vancouver Magazine's Power 50 list. He is the president of City in Focus. It is my pleasure to welcome Tom Cooper to Studio 4 to tell us more.
Hi, good to be here.
So a businessman in the beginning.
Right.
When did you hear the call?
Well, I mean, Jesus...
Or did you get a call?
Jesus was a carpenter. He was a businessman first. I would say I grew up in the church, Fanny, and then I got involved in several businesses, construction, sales, the bookstore, and then I finally just... every time someone once said the things you do when you volunteer or don't have to do often help give you some guidance about what you should do. And I kept volunteering in areas of ministry with people and counseling. So I finally thought, this is what I really love, so I went to seminary.
Where did you go to seminary?
Fuller Theological Seminary.
In?
Pasadena, California.
Oh, okay. So you were in the States first and then Canada?
Right. I've kind of hopped back and forth between Canada and here. And then I went to Fuller for a year, and then I finished my master's. Then I went to England for a couple of years.
Okay, England. Is that where you worked with John? Is it John Stott?
John Stott, one of the chaplains to the Queen of England, and written about 32 books. I met him in the States. He invited me over as a study assistant when I was in my 20s.
That must have been a privilege. He's one of the renowned evangelical preachers.
He is.
Is he not?
He is. In fact, Time Magazine 7 years ago put him in the top 100 people of the 20th century. He was influential to the worldwide church, not just his little Anglican parish.
Right.
And I got to work with him, and someone said, what did you do for John Stott? I said, well, some days I would go to the British Museum and do research for a topic. Some days I would go trace down a shaver for the Bishop of Burma. And so, so you do everything with someone.
Sure, but you must have learned much from him about the calling, about giving back, your mission.
He was a single man. He never married. I asked him, I said, John, did you end up single or did you choose single? And he said, no, I ended up single. Several times I almost got married. But very focused on the church, very focused on issues of faith. And, but so much so disciplined, I realized that's a unique calling, this single-driven life where I was married, I was going to have kids, which I did. And so I learned a lot about intensity and focus from John. He grew up, his father was the attending physician to the King of England. So he grew up on Harley Street, so he understood privilege and wealth, and he cut right through it, which was a good model for me. As I entered the church.
Sure. Did you grow up with privilege and wealth, or did you grow up in the middle-class neighborhood, or
both? I grew
on the streets?
No, not on the streets, but I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Texas, and then my dad got appointed to be a president of a Wall Street company, and we moved into Westchester County, which is one of the more affluent counties of the States. And then I was at, then we moved to Connecticut, a place called Danbury, Connecticut. Yeah.
So,
and that was a private island. So I went to private school. So I kind of went all over the place, from the probably middle class to kind of the lower part of upper class and both.
Sure. But the journey brought you here to City in Focus. Tell me about City in Focus, the mandate, what
City
you
Focus
do.
is basically an organization that's kind of like an orthodox umbrella allowing different people with different ministries to work. We have a guy who is a chaplain to all the fire departments. We have someone who works with East Vancouver. We have someone who works for the Asian community. We have someone, we have different people that work with different things.
Interfaith?
Interfaith, not as much, just low-key, Christian, quiet. We work with other faiths, certainly,
Right.
But interdenominational.
What do you make of interfaith dialogue, the importance of interfaith dialogue?
Essential. I mean, even the Catholic Church in Vatican II documents said it's important to dialogue with Muslims and Buddhists and the Jewish community. I think we should have nothing to fear in the interfaith dialogue.
And as you know, the message, my gosh, in the Torah or the Bible or the Quran, the message, the core message, to me seems essentially the same.
Yeah? Well,
I know there's some differences.
There's some differences.
The core message.
There's some differences.
Love your neighbor as yourself.
I think we should strive, Fanny, to find out what we have in common and what we have separate. The Apostle Paul says in Ephesians that because Christ came, the wall of hostility, the wall of division was broken. and we are no longer strangers, but we are fellow citizens of God. I think the Christian community would argue that it's unique, and I'm sure so does the Muslim, and so does the Jew, and so does the Islamic person. But on the other hand, we should work on what we have in common, so we can work together.
At every level, certainly.
At every level, absolutely.
In Obama's speech last night, he said, you know, that we include the Muslims, not the fundamentalists, but
Right.
we include the Muslims.
Right.
This is not about us against the Muslims.
Exactly.
Let me make that clear.
Yeah, no, exactly, exactly. And I think that, and I have friends in all the communities in Vancouver, and I think it's important to build bridges and share with what we have in common, not focus on our differences. Extremism has no place in the Christian community or in other religious communities or in the secular community. It breaks dialogue, it snaps peace, it gets people reactive.
So how do you enter into dialogue with a CEO, a major mogul, a multimillionaire, and ask him or her to
Yeah.
give you money so you can do good work?
My Robin Hood part.
Yes.
Someone asked me years ago, I'd done a funeral for a young man in his 30s who died of cancer. And his father, 6 months later, asked me, what do you do all day as kind of a chaplain to the downtown core? And I said, I comfort the afflicted, and I afflict the comfortable. Which I think
I
is,
like that line.
Yeah, I stole it from a Scottish minister 40 years ago. But I reckon once you've plagiarized something and used it for over 20 years, it's yours. You don't have to give reference, except on television. Anyway, so what I do all day is I chat with CEOs, I take walks with them. My focus are the up and outers, the business and political leadership of the province and the city, and somewhat nationally as well. And then, when they're doing okay, when they're doing fine, then I might turn around and say, look, you have some resources. Have you ever thought about this need? Have you ever thought about this need? So I build bridges, or I'll take them down with me and show them something.
Give me an example. You don't have to name names, but you can.
I can give one example because I have permission to name names. Take Frank Justra, who people
Yes.
like and who is a philanthropist. I took Frank down to the food bank, and we served food. We sorted food, and then we went to another part of town and we served food. And in that, I think he began to see what the issues of food were, and he's become quite a supporter of the Vancouver Food Bank. I could give you 50 more examples, but the point is, my goal is just to build bridges. I have to become very aware of what's out there. What are the legitimate needs of the charities? There's a lot of froth. We have hundreds of charities in the city at East Van and elsewhere. So which ones are doing a good job? Which ones are maximally using their dollars? And then philanthropists want to know how they can help, but they also want someone to vent it. If they want anonymity, they give it to my foundation, and I give it. If they don't want anonymity, I just build a bridge between that particular project and the philanthropist.
Of course, and bridge building is the future. We know that.
It
and
is.
The key question when you give to any charity is this going to administration?
Right.
Is it going to fancier wallpaper?
Or is it actually going to the need? So what is the overhead? It's an age-old issue. It takes a certain amount of administration and a certain amount of business office expense to generate enough of a structure to go out and ask for resources. But the rule of thumb is if you're not giving away at least 80% of what you are taking in, then it's perceived by a lot of people as being wasteful.
Sure, and it doesn't have to be a lot. I was taught to tithe.
Yeah.
Not in a religious sense even, just taught
Right.
to tithe
Yeah, good
and
for
give
you.
back no matter what.
Yeah. Yeah.
The 10%.
Well, Jesus had this little ditty. He said, to whom much is given, much will be required. So I would say to you that for every wealthy person who most people don't give 10%. In fact, it's a statistical truth that the more you make, the less you give away, both in amount and in percentage.
Really?
So people under $50,000 or $25,000 a year give a higher percentage of their money than someone who maybe makes $200,000 a year. That's a revenue Canada IRS fact. So I think some people are stretched by the tithe, and some people hide behind the tithe. I think for some people who have money, giving 20 or 30% of what they make is probably appropriate.
Of course, and I've never done the math, so I'm not sure I'm at the 10%. What I do know is that I believe in
Yeah.
writing the odd check
Right.
to a cause I would
What
like
that
to
you
support.
like, right? Yeah.